Hi, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines, late night. Well, actually not that late, it's about 8:25 now. I saw a letter from a lady who actually said that she enjoyed the writing because she actually wanted, that was one of her dreams, to be a writer. And I thought that the letter expressed enough of the fears and doubts of most of us when we actually want to do something and just don't have the courage to do it, and that we don't realize that that's really what's lacking. It's not anything about being good enough. You'll never be good enough, okay? Whoever you are, you'll never be good enough in your own estimation. And unfortunately, people take us at our own evaluation. So when you're there bashing yourself and putting yourself down and saying, I can't do this, everybody around you is saying, yes, you're right. So stop putting yourself down. That's the first lesson. So here's the letter. What a beautiful story you created. Such a good writer you are. I'll try and gloss over this. Makes me teary-eyed at the end of it. She's talking about the short story that I wrote, The Valentine Card. And a few people liked it and got it wrong, and still liked it. So one man said that, that was a surprise ending. I thought that she was going to die, and then it turned out that she only fell asleep. No, she died. Anyway, made me teary-eyed at the end of it. How I wish I could write like that. It has been my dream to write a book, even just a book for me, my life story, and I have a title for it already. I'm sure you do. You have a life already. But I need motivation on how to start. I felt I have lots of things to learn before writing my own story. That is why it was put into a halt. How I really wish I am just as brilliant as you. Thank you. Creativeness in you makes me feel I'm not that good. You'll never be good enough. You understand? It starts with you. Makes me feel I'm not that good enough to even write a poem, much more a story, which is my dream. Can you advise me, please? Point us, perhaps. Now, Liza, as I said, I'm trying to be brutal here to shake you up. You'll never be good enough. You'll never give yourself a chance. You're not giving yourself a chance, are you? Because here you are, you're telling us all that you don't know enough. How much do you need to know about your own life story? All that you need to do is to learn to write. And there's an ABC of writing. That's not a pun, an intended pun, okay? But there's an ABC to writing. There's something that you need to know. You need to know how to put things, whether the I comes before E, or all of those things are rules, and you need to know what those rules are, and you need to be able to create. Now, a lot of people have become famous in their writing without knowing any of that. And I am the first to confess that if you started to talk to me about a past participle or any about a verb and an adjective and whether this comes before that and that comes before this, I would be at a loss. How do you get round that? You write intuitively. That's what I do. I write intuitively. Now, you have to be able to feel moved by your own words. How will you ever do that? Read a lot. I remember that I asked one person, I said, what can you advise me? This was a man that wrote technical textbooks for a university, and they became part of the curriculum, and he was very fortunate that with every intake of students his books would sell again, and they were thick textbooks that he had written, and now at the back end he was getting paid for all of that work. Now, as with a lot of new writers who want to get the encouragement, they want the motivation, they want the pat on the back, they want somebody to say, oh, you're just wonderful, you really must grant the world the privilege of actually seeing your work. And I actually did do that that funny reading of a rejection letter from a Chinese publishing company that was so very, very funny. I won't do it again, okay? But you need to find out how other people have done it. Now, I remember listening to an interview on NPR. It doesn't really matter what the name is of the writer for this example, but this was a writer that had a hit, a best-selling book. He'd just written something that was a best-selling book, and during the interview on NPR, it finally was revealed that one of the things that he had done was he had taken his favourite writer and he had taken his book, set it out in front of him, and he'd copied it. He'd copied the entire book. What was the purpose of that? Because in some almost indefinable way your fingers are memorizing stuff. Your mind is going in certain pathways, some neural pathways, which are being forged in a particular kind of way. Now, for me, my favourite writer of all time is John Steinbeck, because John Steinbeck moved me. Now, in anything that you do that is creative, you are seeking to move someone emotionally. Even if you make something, I made a desk very recently. Did it move people? Did it move people to say, wow? That's the word. What's the wow factor? As someone that I knew in Hollywood used to say, yes, well, there's no wow factor, so it'll never win. So, when somebody actually reads one of your stories, do they say, wow? And that's really important. It's not the end, because there will be people who just are incapable of being reached. I wrote a story called The Prayer, and it was an account of being in McDonald's with my then 6-year-old son. And we were having a quiet McDonald's. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but a group of young girls came in who probably maybe 13 or 14, at the age where they're into boyfriends and boys and all of that, and they sat at a table that was not too far away from us. It was an American, it was in America, in California, and they were just so full of life. They were talking and they were giggling, and it really was electrifying. At first, I thought, my God, they don't have a chance. They're not realistic. They don't have a chance of finding out what's real about life. And during that time, I had a moment of a flash of what I consider now of enlightenment, of brilliance, where I realized that it was me that was lacking. And that's where the prayer came in. I wrote a prayer to God and I said, can you help me to feel what they did? Can you help me to feel absolutely flabbergasted at what happened to my friend in school that day? That's what they were on about. One of the girls would tell her story, and the other girls would say, oh no, really? And it was all acting, so to just just could hardly breathe, that they were so excited about what everybody had experienced that day in school. And my issue as a writer was to express how that felt. What did they look like? They flapped their hands like this, oh no! And how did I communicate that? And then how did I communicate to God that actually He had given me all of those things just in that one day when I took my son to school? And my son had turned at the gate of the school and smiled at me and waved his hand. And in that magical moment, I realized that God had already been giving to me everything that those girls had, but I wasn't seeing it. Now, I took that story and I showed it to a man who I'd become kind of friends with in the complex, in the housing complex that I was in. And I let him read a couple of my stories. And then I just lightly said, so what did you think of the prayer? And he said, oh yeah, the one about the airheads, meaning the girls. In other words, he hadn't understood what the prayer was about in any way. He just said, oh yeah, well, kids, airheads, they're just stupid, aren't they? And then I was working for someone at the time, a woman, and I showed her, I asked her, would she like to read one of my stories? And I showed her that story. And she used to make me a cup of coffee when I used to go in to start work. And we'd sit in the kitchen sometimes and chat for a little while before I started work. And so I gave her the story, and then I sat quietly and let her read it. And she cried. She actually wept at the message that was in the story, how I'd found such a magical moment within something that I'd shared with my son, and that I was telling God, forget my prayer, because I don't need what I was praying for. Now, if you want to write, you are in for a tortured existence. You will spend many hours alone. Some of the greatest writers have said that they start work at 9 o'clock in the morning and they put in a full stop. And then they sit there at the desk and they work all day, and by the end of the day they take out that full stop. That's a day's work. Sometimes the white paper, metaphorically speaking, because we're all on computers now, but the blank screen can terrify you. Just like you're telling me that you're terrified. You are frightened of making a mistake. Now, you can't be frightened of making a mistake. It just won't work. So, I got to do something. Hey!
Who's that?
Come on. It's Poggy. Come on. For some reason, Poggy has started coming home. So, you can't be scared. You have to be willing to make a mistake. And one of the greatest books to tell you this is Psycho-Cybernetics. Find that book. It's probably long out of print, but it's called Psycho-Cybernetics. Another book that I will recommend to you is The Writer's Journey. And this is a very special book. And at first you might find so many instructions daunting. But the main thing is, as I was saying about the man the writer who was very successful because he wrote textbooks that were on call as part of a curriculum at a university. He gave me a very good piece of advice, and he gave me a good book. He gave me a book of short stories. The short stories were written by the most amazing collection of world-renowned writers. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, John Steinbeck, people like that, Flannery O'Connor, great writers. And there was almost 100 stories in that book, and I read every single one of them. Some of them I read over and over to get the feel of how someone who is a master at what they do does it. And that's what I'd recommend to you. I absolutely love the writings of John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck will bring you to tears like that. He is a master of emotion. You should read at least 2 of his greatest books. One is East of Eden, that was made into a movie that could never aspire to the kind of greatness that his book achieved. And the other one was East of Eden, which was in 2 books. Now, it might be an encouragement to you to know that that's one of the greatest pieces of literature, American literature, is East of Eden. And yet, in the old-fashioned way, in the traditional publishing scene, they have what are called readers. And these people have a certain ability to get a feel for a book fairly easily. And the reader that was given John Steinbeck's book, East of Eden, to read, complained, why does the writer write in 2 books, book 1 and book 2? Why don't you just write the book? And John Steinbeck, who was also an icon of literature, was understandably furious about that. But read those books. Read them and absorb them, and note how it was that whatever the passage was able to move you. Ask yourself how they did it. Why? And you don't have to be brilliant to understand why something made you cry. You don't have to be brilliant to know that if a book is funny, even if you are in an embarrassingly exposed position in a waiting room of people who you don't know, and you keep laughing out loud, there's a good writer. So, the last piece of advice was the one that was given to me by the man who gave me the book of 100 stories. He said, join a writers group. Now, in a writers group, you go and there may be 5 or 6 people, there may be 10 people. But they're all there because they want to write. And yes, you do have some people in there that will absolutely crucify you. That will create character in you, I can tell you. So you go and you're expected to provide, say, 2 foolscap sheets or 3 of your writing. A story or an essay or something that you've written. You may have to read or send something before they will let you join the group. Well, keep doing it and keep writing something until they do. Because if they are selective, then that's probably going to be a good writers group to go to. And then when you go to the writers group, read your best stuff and sit back and take your medicine, which may or may not be hard, because it may be a more positive slanted writers group than to be harsh. or it may be a mix of both, which would be good. Some of the people that are in there will abuse you in a literary sense, okay? And some will congratulate you on your efforts. But you need to write something, and you need to write something every week or every 2 weeks to go there with. No point in signing up. It won't cost you anything other than perhaps, I don't know, a couple of bucks or something, and then you'll go there and you will do your stuff, and then you'll go away, and you should be encouraged to do more. Now, some people are different on this, on the subject of encouragement. Some people are different. Well, people are different. Some people like to be encouraged. Some people like to, that the writers group will find something in their writing that is good, and that, yes, well, focus on this and focus on that and improve on this, and you'll be doing fine. And others, they might say, well, that was a load of crap. You're not here to waste our time, are you? And that might energize someone to say, oh yeah, really? Well, wait till next week and I'll show something. Some people like to be pushed and others like to be pulled along. Decide which you are and then come to terms with that. So there's a couple of books there that will help you. And a whole world of incredible writers. Another one I particularly enjoyed was Flannery O'Connor. Great writing, very, very funny in some of her stories. So many writers that it's hard to say. The book I mentioned, I can't even remember the title. I didn't bring it with me, which I regret, but that had wonderful stories in it, and some of them by Chekhov, some of them by Solzhenitsyn. Some of them were tough to read. Some books I found it very hard to read because the writers are so good at portraying what is actually happening in their stories. That's what you should be trying to do yourself. I hope you find your voice, because that's what you're looking for, your voice. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. You know who you are. Let me know. Well, Liza, let me know how you get on. But find a writers group. That's all. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.